This is the Hello Bible Podcast. Once again, welcome back to our Bible study series called Understanding the Book of Revelation. Today, we are going to find out what is the connection between Revelation and the book of Daniel. We will also talk about when John received the message of Revelation.
If you have any questions about today's study, please reach out to us on our Facebook page, or leave a comment on the video for this study on our YouTube channel.
If you are looking to find the text on our website, this is study number 3, Situating When the Book Was Written. Let's begin.
The message of Revelation was originally addressed to the Christians of the first century in John's time. And I'm talking here about John the Apostle. Of course, the message is timeless and as important throughout the centuries as well as today. The text in Revelation was written using the imagery and symbols the Christians from the first century were familiar with. We need to keep this in mind because this idea is one of the keys to interpret the book. John was one of the original disciples of Jesus. He received the vision of this message when he was in exile in the island of Patmos. Just so we can understand a little better in what point in history Revelation was written, we need to go even further back in time to the book of Daniel. Like Revelation, the book of Daniel is also a prophetic book, full of symbols, and it covers some of the same prophecies that we see in Revelation. Daniel also received several visions while he was living in exile himself, but Daniel was in Babylon. Today, we will revisit the dream that Babylon's king had one night. The name of this king was Nebuchadnezzar. This dream will help us understand the scope of the timeline covered by biblical prophecies. You will find the story on chapter 2 of the book of Daniel. The Israelites had been brought captives to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar around the year 606 and 605 before Christ. We can see that the story of Daniel happened over 600 years before John even came along. Daniel was among those captives that had been brought to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar, he wasn't one to waste good talent, not even when it came to his own captives. He preferred to use the brightest and the most prominent people to help strengthen his own kingdom even further. That's why some of the young Israelite men were chosen to be instructed in Babylonian culture. And so Daniel and his friends were sent to what I call Babylon University, and eventually they ended up working as advisors to the king. One night, Nebuchadnezzar was in his bed getting ready to go to sleep. He was worried, thinking about the future. That night, the king had a prophetic dream. As it turns out, only Daniel was able to interpret this dream through God's power. God had sent the king a dream about how the history of the world would unfold. It was a message about the kingdoms of this world, starting with Babylon and ending with the second coming of Christ. In the book of Daniel, we see the names of some of these kingdoms and the order in which they appear. Our advantage today is that we can look into our history books and see which kingdoms came after Nebuchadnezzar's. It is not surprising, though, that Daniel described the kingdoms that came after Babylon in the exact order they ended up happening. In that dream, God used images and symbols that were familiar to Nebuchadnezzar, something that would make sense to this king. In the dream, there was a statue with the head of gold, chest of silver, middle and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet and toes of iron mixed with clay. Every part of the statue represented a different kingdom. At the end of the dream came a rock that hit the statue's feet and completely destroyed the entire thing. Nothing was left of the statue. The rock then grew and became a mountain that filled the earth. This rock represents the eternal kingdom that God will establish one day. So in order, we have the following kingdoms or empires represented here in the statue. The head of gold represents Babylon, which lasted from 605 to 539 BC, so that's before Christ. Then the chest of silver, which represents the Medo-Persian Empire. This kingdom lasted from 539 to 331 BC. Next, there's the middle and thighs of brass, which represents Greece. This kingdom lasted from 331 to 168 BC. After that, we have the legs of iron, which represents the Roman Empire, or Rome. And this empire lasted from 168 BC to 476 AD, so that's after Christ. So this kingdom lasted for a very long time. And lastly, we have the feet and toes of clay mixed with iron. These represent the divided nations, and this period started in 476 AD and is going to last until the end of time. John was alive in the 1st century, which places him less than 200 years into the Roman Empire. From the head to the legs of the statue, we have kingdoms of worldwide domination. Then we get to the feet, and we no longer have a kingdom that is powerful enough to dominate the entire world. We now have several divided nations, the countries that we see out there. That's where you and I find ourselves at the moment. We live today in the time of the feet and toes made of iron and clay, right before the return of Christ. Both Daniel and John wrote about what would happen in the future from their point of view. In other words, from the point in history where they were. They both described events in the same prophetic timeline that God had revealed. That's why we see some of the same prophecies being described in Daniel and in Revelation. Now you can see how the books of Daniel and Revelation are books about kingdoms, powers, and systems. Revelation is not a book about one specific human being who wants worldwide domination. These prophetic books show the bigger picture of how the timeline is progressing and how it will continue to progress until Jesus returns. God revealed this information to us not just to satisfy our curiosity, and definitely not to make us afraid. But He revealed it to us so that we could trust that with God, we can have victory in the end.
You can find the Bible verse for today's study in Daniel chapter 2, verse 44. And it says, "And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever."
The texts for this study are on our website, hello-bible.com. Please share our posts and podcast with your friends and family. If you haven't already, please like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Thank you for joining us today. On our next episode, we will talk about how the key to understanding Revelation is hidden in plain sight, right on the first couple of verses.
Goodbye.
See you on the next episode.
See you then.